What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and keep my presentation really short in order that we just get questions and discussion going. Because it's a smaller group, I think it's also better to do that. I have to, first of all, thank you for coming, but I don't know about you, I always find it fascinating reading newspapers. Did anyone catch the newspaper today? LSE swung amongst Libyan uprising, Gaddafi-funded global governance program arrested. If we're talking about Israel, the one thing I always argue is this: be critical of Israel. That's okay. There's no problem with that being critical of Israel. We're a democracy, we're used to it. We joke in Israel, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. In Israel we have 2 Israelis, 4 opinions, 5 political parties, and a change of government. Our national sport is having elections. So opinions, we're everywhere. Some people support settlements, some people don't support settlements, etc. What I'm going to suggest to you today, though, is that what we're seeing, and some of the biggest problem that I have in the work that I am involved in, is a double standard. That Israel today is judged on a level which is actually far beyond and above any other criticism. On the day where Libyans are being massacred on the street by their own government, where the Egyptians have just overthrown a dictator, where the people of Bahrain are seeking democracy, where Yemen, and I can go on throughout the Arab world, the real question that we have to ask ourselves today is one question which is this: why is the world so fascinated with Israel? Because if you were to read the newspaper, I mean, the fact that LSE can turn a blind eye and accept money from a dictator who's killing his own people, and yet the demonstrations are about Israel's building in East Jerusalem, shows the strange world perhaps we have to deal with. There is an over-fascination for the state of Israel. We're interesting, but what I would argue is we're not actually that interesting. What I'm going to argue today is one thing. I'm going to call it OCID, Obsessive Compulsive Israel Disorder. There seems to be today a remarkable fascination that whatever you are, if you're liberal and progressive, you have to be against the state of Israel. I was speaking to a group in Israel of gay, lesbian, transgender participants. Everyone on the group is coming to Israel, gay, transgender in Israel. These guys were remarkably critical of Israel. I turned around to them and I said, you know what? I'm critical. Everyone's critical. It's good that you're critical. More than that, I'm happy that when I wake up on a Friday morning and read our papers, which is the equivalent of the Sunday Times or something in England, that there's a new politician being charged with corruption, that you have a president who's being charged with... You have a democracy going on. Say to these people then, but before you're critical, name me one country in the Middle East which has freedom of sexual expression other than the state of Israel. And they went quiet. What I'm looking at today, and what I would suggest to you today, is that the whole question of human rights has been kidnapped by a radical Islam, or a radical Islamic groups. The fact that Libya sits on the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations is appalling. We were just saying that they were running the centre which was created here was running a course on human rights. Libya, running a course on human rights, I remind you, these are the people that are behind the Lockerbie explosion over Scotland. Yet what happens in, unfortunately, many universities, including the present that we have at the moment, not to insult my guests too much, is a blind ignorance for, or a double standard towards, values regarding the state of Israel. If it's Israel, it's got to be bad. Israel can do no right. And when you get to that situation, that's what I call anti-Semitism. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic criticism of Israel is. If you hold Israel in a standard which can do, where Israel can do no right, that it shouldn't exist, then I think that's certainly a double standard today. What I would argue is, today we're dealing with issues which are not between Israelis and Palestinians. I would argue it's between, we're seeing this in the Arab world as well, an argument between those extremists and pragmatists. By the way, the extremists on our side as well, on the Israeli side as well. But what we're seeing is there's a fundamental choice. Do you work towards a two-state solution? Or do you work towards the destruction of each other's entity? We have some Israelis who don't recognize the fact that 3.5 million Palestinians live and are seeking independence. And we have a very large Arab world that seeks the destruction, by majority, of the state of Israel until today. What I'm arguing is one thing. We have to decide, as people who, I don't know where you put yourself on the political spectrum, but I put myself certainly on the left, as someone who seeks political and human rights, where should we stand? Again, the irony that we see and the double standard that we see is in front of us. Now, take a couple of examples to put up in front of you. People always talk about Israeli checkpoints. Okay, has anyone seen an Israeli checkpoint? Been through an Israeli checkpoint? No, what is Israeli checkpoint? Israel. So some people, I go through Israeli checkpoints every day. I don't live in the West Bank. All right, my house is on the border. So I love when I come to England and people talk to me about security. So, you always go about security. If you look out that window, see where that building is just across the window? That's from my house. This is the lounge. That would be Palestine. I would like an independent Palestinian state. I would like Palestinians to be independent. The question is, how do you guarantee that I'm going to be secure sitting in my lounge? Checkpoints, people are stopped, people are inspected. Good, bad. I drive through them and I see people waiting perhaps for too long. You know what? 6 months ago, a car didn't stop. They shot at the tyres of the car. And this is a checkpoint outside my house. And sure enough, they opened up the, boot. And inside were explosives. So what I'm getting at is this, yes, human rights are an important issue. But one, the finger of human rights contravention on contradicting human rights is always pointed at Israel and nobody else. Thank you, NSE. And two, there's a choice. Do we have the right to stop people, inspect people, when you're living in a situation which is a real threat to real people? And I think that that's certainly the case with Israel. I mean, look, for example, the other controversial is Israel's fence, wall, barrier. As if that Israel is the only country in the world that has one. There are 23 other countries in the world that have some form of barrier or security barrier which restricts access to or entrance to a country. I'll be honest with you, when I see the wall and I see the barrier, I see it every day. I look at it and I can tell you one thing. The thing that goes through my mind is it's a tragedy. If you want a statue of the failure of Israelis and Palestinians to make peace, that's it. But anyone who's been to Israel, and I know there's Israelis amongst us, is, you know one thing, since it's been resurrected, Israel's become once again a normal country, as far as terrorism and those people being killed. We look at the major three issues in front of you. One is Jerusalem, second of all, the right to return, and the third of all is the settlements. What's actually interesting is a lot of them, and I've given you the map so you can take away, a lot of what seems to be the center of the conflict has actually become less problematic in recent times. I'm going to talk to you about, and I don't know how much it was revealed here, the question of the Palestinian WikiLeaks, what was called the Palestine Papers. Did you get that, Hen? Was that, yeah? Because what I found is fascinating with the Palestine Papers, which was basically Al Jazeera leaking 1,500 documents of discussion between Israelis and Palestinians, was it actually showed that when pragmatists sit down together, you can actually get to a resolution to this conflict. The problem is, once they were leaked, the Palestinians denied it because they did damage to it, and the Israelis denied it because they did damage to it. But you had, for a small moment, a chance of peace. When we talk about extremism, let me just show you a few recent clips from